Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Rosemary Heath, Acting Head of Department of Library and Information Studies. Today, we gather for a very significant activity in the life of the DLIS, the Daphne Douglas Distinguished Lecture. This lecture is hosted in honor of Professor Emerita Daphne Rowena Douglas for her sterling service to the library and information profession, especially in the Caribbean, and for her contribution to the development of the DLIS and subsequent service as lecturer and head of department for a number of years. The inaugural staging of this lecture took place in the year 2012. This is the third such staging. We recognize her work with the National Library of Jamaica. As such, we thought it fit to partner with the NLJ in the staging of this year's lecture. In a little while, you will hear from Miss Beverly Lashley, the National Librarian, through her representative, Mr. Nicholas Graham, Deputy National Librarian, and incidentally, part-time lecturer in the department. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Graham. On September 26, 2019, Professor Douglas celebrated her 95th birthday. Subsequent to that, a group of 5 from the department visited with her, presented her with a gift from the department, and listened as she reminisced about her life as a librarian and her work at the UWI in general, as well as the DLIS in particular. She admits that when retirement knocked on her door, she did not want to leave. Here I pause to quote her as she gave her response on the occasion of her being the honoree at the UWI commemoration celebrations held on March 22, 2008. She said, "I loved my life on campus. I did not want to leave when the time came. The story goes that they had to engage 4 stalwart security guards to lift me bodily off the campus. The story continues that they posted fierce dogs at the gates to keep me out." Such was her love for what she did. On the occasion of our visit, she engaged us by encouraging us to keep the flag flying, even though she was mindful that much has changed since she was in active service. She implored us, the younger generation of library and information professionals, to make use of new technology as we seek to provide library and information services in the 21st century. Hence today's focus on artificial intelligence. At the time of our visit, she was in relatively good health, and she stated her intention to attend today's function. However, she was recently hospitalized, and although now home, has indicated her absolute inability to attend. But she, while expressing regret, has asked that I convey to you her love and warm wishes, and that we make a recording of this function available to her as soon as possible. At this time, I wish to extend a special welcome to our guest speaker, Dr. Shawn Thorpe, who is the head of the School of Computing and Information Technology at the University of Technology and president of the Jamaica Computer Society. He is also a founding member of the board of the Jamaica Information Technology Services Alliance, JITSA. You will concur that we are fortunate to have him agree to address us today. Dr. Thorpe, we look forward to what you will be sharing from your wealth of knowledge in the field of technology in general and artificial intelligence in particular. We also wish to welcome specially invited friends of Dr. Thorpe, who will be here very soon. We acknowledge the presence of Professor Webinte Wariboko, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, of which DLIS is a part. Welcome also to Dr. Pollard Stewart, the current head of the DLIS, who is on sabbatical leave for this academic year. Dr. Paulette Carr, Mona Campus Librarian, Professor Faye Durant, Dr. Shelley Robinson, all past HODs of the DLIS, we welcome you warmly. Members of staff of the National Library of Jamaica, retired DLIS lecturers, retired and current members of the Library and Information Association of Jamaica, especially the members of the 2021 Accurate Planning Committee, fellow lecturers from the Faculty of Humanities and Education and the wider UWI, colleagues from the Mona Library, colleagues all, students, members of the public, thank you for choosing to share with us in this way. We are delighted to have you. Technology extends reach, and so we can no longer look at physical numbers in a room to judge attendance. As such, we extend a warm welcome to the persons who are joining us via the YouTube live feed, made possible through the services of the UWI Mona Information Technology Services. Welcome to the MITS team. At the same time, we note that others who would have otherwise been here are participating in the COVID-19 Pandemic Preparedness Conference, which also started at 5:30 this afternoon in the Faculty of Medical Sciences. But I do thank all of you who have been able to attend to make this occasion a special one. At this time, I am going to invite Professor Webinte Wariboko, Dean of the Faculty, to bring us greetings. He will be followed by Mr. Graham, who is representing Miss Beverly Lashley from the National Library.
Good evening, everyone. Let me kindly recognize the following persons, the following colleagues. Professor Faye Durant, Dr. Pollard Carr, Campus Librarian, Dr. Pollard Stewart, the head of department, who is now on sabbatical leave, Dr. Rosemary Heath, who is acting head of department, colleagues from the campus library and the National Library, friends of the department, and Faculty of Humanities and Education, welcome. It's indeed a great delight, and I made sure that whatever I was doing, and however much I was pressed for time, that I made myself available. I have a sentimental connection with these public lectures being organized in all of our 8 departments now, among other things, for one reason. Some of these lectures, and this one in particular, is intended to honor Daphne Douglas, one of the pioneer institutional builders of the University of the West Indies. When I came to this university 26 years ago, she had gotten to the point when it was obvious that she was going to retire before long. But it was not before she had made all the contributions by way of curriculum development, by way of putting things in place, that made it possible for us to talk about, see, and build upon what we today know as the Department of Library and Information Studies. It is on the back of such pioneers like Daphne that we stand. It is on their shoulders that we stand. Sometimes history could be so unkind, particularly if it is not properly told. And generations after the pioneers have done their work might take for granted that the skies have always been blue, that what we see today has always been there, proverbially, like manna that fell from heaven. But they are, in fact, the hard work, the selfless work of persons who toiled day and night in the sun, in the rain, to make things possible. Some of them did so much of institutional building at the expense of their own career advancement by way of publication and such related things that are more tied to the individual person. When you write a book, when you write an article, all of which you have to do by finding time to do it, it is your name that is there. It's on the shelf forever. So if you wrote so many books, persons after will see your title, the titles of your book, your names, and they remember you by these titles and say what a great person you are. But if you devoted your life to building the institution, because you don't claim it in the way in which the author of an article or a book would claim these productions, it is often forgotten. And yet for these things to have happened, you have spent your time not writing articles, not writing books. That is why for these persons, these things that are being done, such as distinguished lectures, to honor them, even before they are no more, is of particular interest to me. She represents to the Department of Library and Information Studies what Roy O.J. represents to the Department of History and Archaeology, and what collectively all of them represent to the University of the West Indies. It is in the light of these colleagues, among other things, that I want you to appreciate the significance of this lecture. All the other heads of department who have been recognized, including Shirley, have only followed in the trends set. You do a literature review only because in many instances there was something in front of you. You build on whatever you are doing and say you are a creative thinker only because you are creative with reference to something. But sometimes for these fellows, they did the work at a time when there was nothing. When in fact it was thought that if you came from certain sections of the globe, you didn't have the creative capacity to do things. Their challenges were completely different from the challenges of today. And that is why we also have to be careful when we compare achievements. They worked at a time when the odds were very high. It's in the light of these colleagues that I invite you to appreciate the significance of today. We honoring one of the stalwarts of the University of the West Indies. Welcome to this particular occasion, and I wish to particularly recognize the lecturer who will be speaking to us about artificial intelligence. Intelligence became artificial because originally it was original. And so it is that those who initially did those things before intelligence became artificial have a greater place in the annals of our history. Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I bring these remarks on behalf of Beverly Lashley, National Librarian, who had a prior engagement on this special occasion at the Daphne Douglas Distinguished Lecture. It is only fitting to have continued conversations dedicated to this stalwart librarian who has devoted a mammoth portion of her life to the library profession. The NLJ has been blessed with devoted and dedicated librarians who have contributed to its progress. We are proud to state that Professor Emerita Daphne Douglas is the longest-serving board member since the NLJ's inception and held the title of board chairman from 1994 to 2011. Daphne Rowena Douglas began her career as librarian in the Colonial Secretariat in 1951 and played an active role on the national and international scene, making significant contributions to the development of libraries. Professor Douglas's contribution to the NLJ includes two major legislations: the Legal Deposit Act of 2002 and the NLJ Act of 2010. Since 2015, nearly 5,000 copies of works have been deposited at the NLJ, as it is mandated by law to deposit works with the NLJ. The NLJ Act came into effect on the 31st of December 2010 and made the NLJ an autonomous body having its own legislator in keeping with international practices that govern national libraries. To honor Professor Douglas's legacy, in 2015, the main reading room at the NLJ was declared the Daphne Douglas Reading Room at a ceremonial event. Her legacy continues to shine at the NLJ as a special glass case was made in her honor, showcasing her accolades, awards, and memorabilia. A true pioneer, Professor Douglas can boast of being the first member of the teaching staff at the library school in 1971, the first female Jamaican and the first female Jamaican professor, and the first female at the University of the West Indies Mona campus to be honored in 2008. Throughout my professional career, Professor Douglas has always mentored me, giving sound advice of not passing up opportunities and to visit exotic destinations like Indonesia due to news of widespread war. One thing she said that will always remain with me: do not live your life in fear. And that has aided in shaping my worldview of aiming for the utmost in whatever I do. I'm sure I'm not the only person who can recount these wonderful sentiments of Professor Douglas. Many librarians in the audience can relate and say the same. Today we are elated that she has worked unstintingly for the advancement of the library profession and is recognized by the institution that she has given sterling years of service. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. At this time, I welcome to the platform a very talented young lady. I met her just a while ago, about a month or two ago, but she has impressed me so much. She attends the St. Andrew High School for Girls. She's a sixth former. Her name is Rhea Simone Lawrence. I promise you a treat. And when it's all done, you can tell me if I was wrong. Rhea Simone, it is your time. Welcome.
contract. How we can get national status when it's not even West Indian? You have to come from? Nobody can fool with it that. Everyone, I want you. But selfish. When I start near foreign currency, this a shit to it in a Kia state. When I say the short selfish, walk Pollard, swim in the ocean, I grew up on tree. Pollard, you could have used this breeze for a creature. They all up and give you to eat. They run. They have what was to eat. Hey! When I saw your dog and I ran around the country. More than half of the country. So I'm these words to come of it. And I'm doing it. Don't see that. But
And so you see I speak the truth. All right. Yes, bro. She's a 6'4". Is that high school? Okay, Prof. I'll speak with her after about that and see what the possibilities are. But can we have another round of applause for her? Absolutely stunning. Beautiful work. And so at this time, Dr. Ruth Baker Gardner will be joining us on the platform to present a reflection on Professor Daphne Douglas, after which Ms. Tanya Manasai, lecturer in the department, will introduce our guest speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, all protocol observed. Professor Daphne Douglas, CD, MLIS, FLA, ALA. Professor Daphne Douglas received her early education at St. Hilda's High School, located in Brownstown, St. Anne, and Southermere Commercial School in the parish of St. Andrew. Her library education began in 1954 with a Jamaican government scholarship to the Eastern Caribbean Regional Library School in Trinidad and Tobago. There she completed requirements for election as an associate of the Library Association of the United Kingdom. In 1957, a Jamaica Library Service scholarship took her to Leeds College of Commerce's School of Librarianship in England. This led to her election as a Fellow of the Library Association. Later, she was awarded a 3-month UNESCO Fellowship to the Danish School of Librarianship. In 1974, she attained the Master of Library Science from the University of Pittsburgh. Professor Douglas's first post as a librarian was with the Jamaica Civil Service. There she also served as a stenotypist and secretary. She joined the Jamaica Library Service in 1956 and served until 1971. Professor Douglas's first position as a librarian position was as a cataloger, and this was followed by the position of regional librarian of the St. James Parish Library. She then held the position of principal librarian and training officer. Professor Douglas was also the chief librarian at the Institute of Jamaica. She also served as librarian at the Permanent Mission of Jamaica to the United Nations. When the Department of Library and Information Studies was opened in 1971, it was staffed by 2 lecturers. Professor Daphne Douglas was one of the 2 and served as head of department on 2 occasions, 1976 to 1980 and 1982 to 1993. In 1984, she completely shattered the glass ceiling and became the first Jamaican female professor to be appointed at the UWI. Professorial affiliation includes the Jamaica Library Association, later renamed the Library and Information Association of Jamaica, and the Association of University, Research and Institutional Libraries, ACURIL. She was Professor of Library Studies from 1984 to 1994, then became Professor Emerita in 1994. Additionally, she was the chairman of the Board of Management of the National Library of Jamaica from 1997 to 2011. Her publications include major articles and reports on Caribbean libraries and information systems. For example, her work appears in the Encyclopedia of Library and Information Science, the International Handbook of Contemporary Developments in Librarianship, and several UNESCO publications. She has been the recipient of many honors and awards over the years. These include the Silver Musgrave Medal for contribution to library development, the Junior Chamber of Commerce Ligoni Chapter Special Award for Outstanding Service to Community, member of the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander, conferred by his appointment of His Excellency, the Governor General of Jamaica, the Award for Outstanding Service in the Field of Librarianship by the Association of Librarians in the Jamaica Library Service, Woman of Distinction, National Award for Distinguished Service in Librarian and Unbroken Service in the Field of Library Education, the Institute of Jamaica Centenary Medal for Meritorious Service in the Field of Librarianship. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing the featured speaker for this, the third staging of the Daphne Douglas Distinguished Lecture, Dr. Shawn Thorpe. He's Associate Professor and Head of the School of Computing and Information Technology at the University of Technology. Dr. Thorpe is an academic and researcher in the field of information technology security, with over 2 decades of experience working in the information technology industry. Dr. Thorpe is a recognized authority on the Caribbean in his field. His research interests include digital forensics, cloud computing, green computing, social media security, data mining, and artificial intelligence. He's the current president of the Jamaica Computer Society and is a founding member of the board of the Jamaica Information Technology Services Alliance. He also serves on several local and international program committees of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers and the Association for Computing Machinery. His work is helping to shape the computing industry through products and policy. His influence as an educator is shaping the minds of Caribbean computer scientists. This evening, we will have the opportunity to explore the merger of computer science and information studies as Dr. Thorpe explains how an evolutionary leap in computing is transforming information services and the information industry. In his lecture entitled Artificial Intelligence for Next Level Library and Information Services. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Shawn Thorpe.
I'll pay kind attention. A pleasant good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's in fact a pleasure to be in such a distinguished company. I want to make a confession. I'm a true dual citizen. I graduated from this institution at one point in time in my life, and I actually also graduated from CAS UTech at another point in time in my life. I just happened to be there as well. But it's great to be in good Jamaican company, if I can put it that way, simply put. My spirit was moved when I was asked to do this lecture, and I had to find something to connect with as it relates to the recognition to Professor Douglas in particular. So she went to St. Hilda's High School. And I went to a high school just a little bit further up the road called York Castle High. And I remember, as a young boy going to school and as a deputy head boy at the school, all of us used to work with those young ladies back then. But Professor Douglas was of a younger era than I was. Let me put it that way. She was of a younger era than I was. But my spirit resonated with that in particular, that, we all use the library in Brownstown. I want to start there. So, I had to find something to connect with as it related to this particular presentation, and that resonated very well. So, a pleasant good afternoon to you all again. It's really good company that we are in today. So, the whole space of artificial intelligence and the library maybe new to some. It's really happening around the world at scale otherwise, but we're going to step back in this conversation. I'm going to call it a conversation this evening to sort of share with you what I think we really should be doing here in the Caribbean in particular, aligned to what is happening as a part of a wider global focus. So it is really a pleasure to share in this particular conversation with you. So a few things that are particularly important before we get into what exactly we want to appreciate from this particular lecture is to quickly define a few things. A library in its true sense, from I was a boy at school, is really nothing more than a curation of various sources of data. But I will say in 2020, it is predominantly becoming digital. In other words, everything is electronically stored as best as we can think of it. My son does not want to go to what we call the traditional library because he can find everything in a digital format in order to carry out his homework, including various assessments. And I'm talking up to PEP level, by the way, because I have a young one doing PEP, and everything is collected digitally as a part of that library. I should tell you further, the data is now of such proportions that all the information that the library stores, if you think about it here on the Mona campus, is in the context of what we call petabytes of data, which probably might be sitting in books. But when we think about it digitally, it's something that seems like an infinite amount of repository of resources that we need to be working with. Key to it, however, is the fact that the library represents both a digital and a social space in which we are working. And key to that space is the need for us to collaborate the various resources that are there and to ensure that there is ongoing access to the community. It's very, very important. So if we start with that preface of our conversation as to what the library is, then we can actually move the argument just a little bit further to suggest exactly what is this phenomenon called artificial intelligence. It's not really new, especially for those in the computer science community who had to take these as courses here, both at UWI and elsewhere. It is something now that in 2020 has become mainstream that no sector in society can ignore anymore, including the library. So I'm particularly happy that we're having the conversation. So very specifically, artificial intelligence speaks to the reality that what we are having around us is computers mimicking as best as possible real human intelligence. Now somebody would say that this is laughable. Probably Professor Douglas may have said it was laughable in her time period as well. She may not have. But the reality is that we are having a lot of work taking place by professionals in industry to ensure that machines can assist us more in terms of our daily work and our daily lives. With that said, if the reality is that the machine is to mimic real intelligence and human behavior, then it is important to sort of categorize what we are dealing with here. There are two forms of artificial intelligence, very specifically to understand the conversation. There's what is called strong artificial intelligence, where we will find eventually with time that the machines will really be the ones doing the work, including probably studying and actually getting all the jobs. Probably a little bit of food for thought there, right? There seems to be an issue there. We're not quite there yet. The literature is indicating that we are no more than about 10 years away from this adoption, which we call strong artificial intelligence. However, in 2020, and at least for the last decade, we have been actually handling what is called weak AI. The field of artificial intelligence is over 50 years old, but in terms of its mainstay in the field of computing, it is now gaining increased traction. So specifically, when we talk about weak artificial intelligence, that is the type of artificial intelligence that is now hitting the community. And what is that really? Well, we are saying that artificial intelligence in the weak form allows us to pattern the behavior of domain experts, because a domain expert in a library, be it you're looking for geography, history, political studies, think about all the things the university provides, or the education system provides. it provides it in domains. So the library is so aligned. But very carefully, what we are saying now is that we are going to train computers in a way that they can pattern the behavior of those domain experts by getting specific corpus of data and then allowing the machines to understand everything about the data. So everything relating to geography, everything relating to history, everything relating to math, we are saying the machine can process that once it has that compendium of data. So everything in the physical library can be transferable to a form that the machine can hold. And we are using techniques very specifically in artificial intelligence called machine learning, where the machine seeks to learn on its own, just as how humans seek to learn on their own. So the machines learn after having a certain amount of data and being able to make inferences. That's what they call machine learning. And there's a further subset of that called deep learning, where we can take compendium of data from various repositories and put them together to make inferences. We call that deep learning using neural networks. But this is not a computer science lecture. I'm going to try and ensure that we keep this at a level that when we walk away from here, we can appreciate the terms and some of the concerns that are raised in the society today as it relates to how AI affects the industry and in particular the library. So when we think about it with great care, we are in the weak AI era, but we are not very far from the adoption of strong AI. So specific to how the library has transitioned over the last decade, we are realizing that you're dealing with a different generation of users each time around. So you have baby boomers, you move from that, you have millennials, you have generation X, Y, Z, you now have alpha. You have a situation that the library of users are continuously changing. And what you then have to appreciate is how to respond to those users. Specific to that is the reality that all the data must now be available on demand in an open environment. And what does that mean? It means that UTech, UII, all the various institutions probably need to be collaborating their resources to make them available to the wider public, because you need to be more responsive in how you provide the data to the public, as opposed to having silos of just providing the data to small, close communities. So what you're seeing globally is that data becomes more open. Research in particular is now becoming more open. So the library has to respond to that. And we use what is called an open science framework to support that. So artificial intelligence is working within the context of this open science framework. So if we pay very careful attention, what we are going to see is a situation as this. Well, probably you might have took that from something I saw online. You have a library where the machine actually can digest all that material, but that may be one form. So I want to share with you just very quickly, I think it should be here. Gentleman told me that it was here. Let's just play a quick video of something that every institution should pay attention to. You, the new library.
Where can I find the book Foundation Maths by Anthony Croft?
Hello. There are 3 copies of Foundation Maths by Anthony Croft in aisle number 4. Would you like me to take you there?
And so it's very much just a state machine. They take goes in there to there to there, and it's just a use action. But we might want to make that very fluid. Why is it just to be sort of one to the next and you can type in the search terms, you see results? We want to be able to able to interact naturally with you. We want to actually be able to understand what you're saying, to have a good natural conversation with you. And that again means that we have to approach things a bit differently.
All right, so the context of the conversation here, as it is now, is that if the library can have a U to start assisting the traditional student user or any regular user to have access to the books, you may argue the traditional librarian, as how you'd normally have them support students or support a public, is changing or has changed, because you'll have machines who will be able to carry out these tasks seamlessly to help the public. Now, that's what I call a proof of concept of students within a university like this one being able to design and support the use of the existing library in a way that uses artificial intelligence to navigate the existing library. Notwithstanding, the traditional library is dying. Its current form is dying because there's already heavy automation of the existing books in the traditional libraries like this one that is actually forcing the hands of libraries around the world to pay very keen attention, traditional libraries. And I'm going to give you an example in a moment. So a discussion that we need to have is, well, do you still remain relevant in the traditional library setting as we know it here in the Caribbean? I mean, the idea is that everything is digitized, so your relevance will be something that will be questioned in very short order, if not already questioned. All right, the end user of the library now demands a lot more. I know my son does. He uses Google Assistant or Cortana to actually pull all the information that he needs. I can only take him to a traditional library because I have to remind him that these were the spaces I grew up in as a boy, right? But he's not taking it as seriously in terms of the ability to treat with the library as that repository that he needs to read the physical books in the form that we used to use them in our time. And I have to speak very specifically to our time as a select few of us. So here's what we have to pay attention to. There are already automation of tools available in the form of things like Google Assistant. You know, you have Siri, you have Alexa, you have Cortana. All of these are now available pervasively at devices that we buy out there every day. Our phone simply is that computer that stores a digital library. So the question is, really and true to fact, the existing traditional form becomes questionable. I bring to your attention something that is very, very important that must now be looked at. We have several open access artificial intelligence tools that replaces the existing library in its current format. We may or may not know it. So for the purposes of what I'm doing in this presentation, I'm going to give you an example. If you use a tool, for example, like Wisdom AI, which is available for free, and I typed in coronaviruses, which is really the topic of the day. All right, even if I don't spell it correctly. What obtains is that if I decided to go to the library to find all the possible books on a particular date, it will start giving me various information about the books, what publications that are available, so I can look for the publications. I can start navigating those items of published resources. without having to walk through the doors of UTech or UWI's existing library, or Tom Redcan or the Brownstown Library, just name all of them on the island. It therefore means that we can sit from the comfort of our living rooms or the comfort of our homes and simply navigate. Now, if you're a researcher, you can pull journals. Of course, what you're looking at here is just a snapshot of what is available, because once you become a registered open user, you have access to the journals, you have access to everything, all right, that is available. Very specifically, if I actually went and decided, and you notice here that University of Oxford has signed up to it, other universities are signing up, it's a growing trend. If I wanted to find everything relating to coronaviruses in the US or all research literature just in the United States, it allows me to generate quickly a list of the various facets of what the publications are, the citations that are available. Have you seen this before? No? So the idea is that there's a lot of things already available online, digitized as libraries, that makes available to you and I the resources at fingertips. Of course, we're encouraging students in the universities, the colleges, even high schools, to start realizing that there is a wealth of access to data that can be used in this particular format. So I say that to say this. If you wanted to pay more attention to adopting in your traditional library the use of artificial intelligence, there's already an existing stack, artificial intelligence stack of tools that you could be experimenting with to see how it treats and compares what you have within the existing environment. Interesting to note, I should tell you, that Springer, just in the last year, and for those of you who have been using the library at the university level, Springer in computing is a big space for us. What we recognize is that Springer decided to create an artificial intelligence tool called Springer Nature SciGraph, which, to my surprise, is actually producing full books on its own. So the artificial intelligence is able to write its own book. Hold on, what did I just say? You said Professor Douglas was writing papers. We all write papers in the academic sphere of things, but you now have artificial intelligence writing their own books. There's a book out on lithium batteries, 420 odd pages. When you read the narration and the content, it's quite coherent. It means the machine was able to compile all of that and put it together for processing and use. With that said, it now comes front and center to us to say, well, okay, what are we dealing with here? There's a global digital library, which is available all across Africa, where young kids who do not have access to the traditional library will have an opportunity to use Google Assistant, for example, to go through the levels of global digital library, and they can study anything they want, which they would have traditionally hoped for in a main town library. So these are youngsters in Kenya, for example, using the experiment of the Global Digital Library to support the opportunities. My son uses Global Digital Library at his school. He uses it now to support his homework. Of course, I recognize that when he started using it, to be fair to you, that's when I actually learned that the tool existed. So it meant that people were actually using the things. So in other words, there is a shift. So there are several applications to which AI can be used, including the library. In universities and colleges in particular, it is now a part of a digital transformation campaign to process college admissions, to look very carefully at the personalized learning habits of students, to carefully assess market trends relating to enrollment. You can look at it to rank your professors as well in terms of time that they spend teaching various courses and how they have been teaching it. The dean gets it back as a form of an assessment as to whether or not this is really good. So with that said, it presents some very interesting dilemmas, very interesting dilemmas. The 21st century librarian then has to be an individual, or it could be a machine, that actually embraces the open science framework for how they actually build out and use these large compendiums of data. The librarian is truly who we call a data scientist in the computing community, but we in the computing community sometimes have to take off the blinkers and realize that because computing is in every field of life today, the technology is everywhere, it also means that the librarian now becomes who we call a data scientist, who is a very well-paid professional in the business anyway, you know, as a human character. But the idea is that you must now start appreciating how to use these various algorithms to support how you harness and generate insights from the data to support your end library users, right? So this is something that we have to pay very careful attention to. With that said, the caution as to how we run the library today is that how we teach students, how we teach young ones to actually operate and pick resources from the library is something that has to look very carefully at introducing youngsters to algorithms from early, introduce them how to collect and collate documents from digital repositories, question the data sources in a meaningful way, and actually harvest that software and data to support highly relevant outcomes. So this could be you or me. Let's evaluate for a moment. Are you the person in the case on my right or left, or are we going to seek to have both working side by side in the existing library? I put it to you, this is already happening. You have both working side by side in the existing library, or eventually, if you don't start having that, then you're going to have that. I wonder what that means. It actually means, I'm being provocative here, it could be a little bit, that the library now simply is managed by the complete what? Robot in this case, which actually has all these artificial intelligence algorithms embedded with it to support learning. So what will happen? All the children will be playing? That's something to think about, right? Will everyone be playing? But the idea is that the library is shifting in terms of using the technology in a more serious way to process data. So it then puts a very interesting spin, ladies and gentlemen, on what are potentially the various open challenges and opportunities of this. I'm not here to debate which is the accurate position to take, but to really just put it as it is. If we can use Alexa, Cortana, Google Assistant, which are all software tools available on the market, we can go to Digicel, we can go to Lime, we can buy these products and use them. If they can be used to harness data in these digital libraries, then what then will obtain over time is that you're going to have machines becoming more skilled in learning how to recognize your needs and the pattern of your needs as it relates to this particular data set that you're using daily. It will become a new normal, actually. It has become a new normal. It has become a new normal. In the university environment, it is very hard right now for us to get students to use the existing libraries. And I'm sure there are librarians here who will agree with me. So therefore, my argument, make the radical shift to start using the AI to actually attract that audience, and you yourselves being a part of that space. So just like our daily lives, in regular daily lives, what we must now recognize is that the library has been putting in place, and we have been writing programs in the schools and so on to allow students to use what are called bots or chat bots to get advice about resources in the libraries. I have started to see a lot more of that happening now to engage users, which is quite good. You have a lot of data visualization coming from the libraries. The end users in the libraries don't like to read these thick books. They would like to ensure that they can use these nice visualization tools that are available to harness what you see in the literature. So I would argue for a moment then, as we continue to explore, how do we go about carefully spending the time identifying how this information can be useful? Machines, on the other hand, can spend a lot of time imaging and collecting the data that you need from libraries, assess the collection of it very carefully, the metadata that is collected, and then we can use it later on to archive our research and studies. Students find research very hard. To sit down and actually work on a project takes time. To review large compendiums of books takes time. This is actually what the community is asking for, and globally, I am seeing a lot more input being made in using machine learning. Librarians are working with the machines and that is what we have to do in Jamaica in a more open way. As AI becomes better and better at understanding the information, there has to be the specific concern. Will you and I remain relevant over that time? And all of this is no longer going to be a novelty. It's going to become, a minute, please. So with time, it is going to become a situation where you and I will have to be competing to either keep up with that knowledge, or you and I will have to pay attention to the fact that competition is no longer competition but collaboration. We could also argue that right now that you should pay attention to a situation that the machines are collecting a lot of data on you out of these libraries, digital libraries. And it presents something that I call an ethical dilemma. The library is no longer going to be a place where you will have any privacy of that data. So when Cortana collects all the information that my son keeps asking for every evening when he's doing some homework or assignment, over time, that data is going to be stored, and 10, 15 years later, Cortana from Microsoft will be looking at all of that and assessing the trends of what that data could mean to them. AI may have inherent biases, or what we call poor filters on the data, because if the incomplete data is collected on a particular historical situation, it could present great misinformation to the community. Because just like humans who make mistakes or who provide misinformation, and we know the period we are living in, then if the AI starts doing the same thing, it's going to generate a lot of biases in the data. So for example, in 2010, we had the Haiti earthquake, and I recall there was a prediction using machine learning on how earthquakes are patterned in the Caribbean. What was very interesting to me is that the Haiti earthquake was predicted the same day, the same time, but 50 years out. 50 years out. And I reflect on that even to this day, that if the machine is able to make that kind of prediction, it would have been probably more helpful to us if we could get that information a little bit earlier. Probably people in Haiti could have relocated or had bunkered down a little bit better, but we recall what happened then. And we are facing a lot of earthquakes now. If AI could help us to assess some of those challenges, that would be useful. So with that said, what I am seeing as one of the trends is the fact that AI algorithms have this situation where it is intellectual property of the persons who write the code that is being used to process the data, just like you in the presentation that was just shared with you in that university abroad. The issue over time is that that might be sold to the institution, and that becomes a black box. But that could be good, that could be bad, something we could sort of debate a little bit further on. We might need to push where more of the tools created might not be proprietary, but they may be open for the public to be using them. So there are several open source tools, and by virtue of these open source tools, what I'm finding is that you will have a situation that a lot more persons can participate with respect to using AI to drive the institution and actually drive the collection of data and study of data in those institutions. I am concerned though, I'm particularly concerned that if you have products like Alexa and Siri and Cortana, what you're going to find over time, if you use these digital repositories which are proprietary, they may try to sell you something, and you're not in the business of being sold things when you're actually looking for information from the library. Because the library, as you and I know, is to build the information literacy, to build your intellectual capital, but you don't want to be sold something while you're doing that on a subscription from Amazon. So, in essence, if we step back, I would contend that the library definitely, as a part of the Industry 5.0 time we are living in, where human intelligence from machines is something that is a new normal, is a part of the hallmark of what I call digital transformation in the library. I don't think we have spent enough time here in Jamaica and across the Caribbean doing this properly. The library has not been a part of the conversation with all the public stakeholders that are talking about digital transformation agendas for the businesses. It is time that the library needs to become a part of that. Very specifically, I'm concerned, and we should all be concerned, that AI has certain ethical and privacy questions that need to be answered in terms of how this transformation is supporting the libraries. Notwithstanding, it is very important to support this AI because it is helping us to grow in terms of access to intellectual knowledge, and the AI is one vehicle in 2020 and beyond that will allow us to get there. I would contend that right now there has to be an immediate call for the library to spend time with government and all the private sector stakeholders. A private-public partnership needs to be defined right now in terms of if we are going to adopt AI as a part of the digital library to support greater digital literacy, then with the advent of the Data Protection Act that is imminent by government, it is imminent, what provisions have been made for the library to treat with this data? It is something that has not been coming up. As a matter of fact, in being asked to do this presentation, I actually called up the Joint Select Committee team, including the Jamaica Computer Society, and said, but hold on guys, I am not seeing anything in the provision that is to be passed in Parliament that is treating with the library. Let us start putting something together now before this presentation, right? To ask these questions and to sit with that team to ensure that there is broadened inclusion, because once you start putting in legislation to regulate data, where entities like the library exist that will now be driven by such data, then what is being put in place to support that infrastructure? If people misuse the data, fairness or treatment with that data, it's a lot of charges that will come under the Data Protection Act. 4 to 10% of any entity's business, including the National Library, right, as a state-run institution. So this is a concern, and it's a call for this community in particular to be a part of a stakeholder group, through the Jamaica Computer Society and otherwise, to have that sit-down conversation to see how specifically we can treat with, if we are moving in this direction, which we have to keep moving in anyway, to ensure that the library gets the fairness of play in terms of how the AI transformation will affect its output and its throughput. Very specifically, these regulations are not things that can be treated lightly. I personally do not know all the answers to how that should work, but what I can say, it is a very timely conversation to have, especially in 2020, where the world is asking for us to be truly digital in terms of our operations. It is happening globally, lest we forget that, and we are a part of that global ecosystem. So the AI is here to stay. The issue will be over time. Will we be ready to move from weak AI to strong AI? Are we ready yet, even just to adopt weak AI? But the idea, it is here to stay, and I'm now open to your questions. Thank you. I think my mic has been going a little bit in and out, to be fair here, but I hope you have heard me. Yes? So I'm open to questions at this point, and I did not come here to give you a long, boring lecture. The idea was to... Yes, Professor.
Thanks for the lecture. I find it very stimulating in various ways, particularly for those of us who are not already in the business itself.
Yes.
It reminds me of several other things one would have had at other places, but brings these things together in a way that allows me to pose this question. So thank you very much. One gets an impression from the lecture that AI is capable of being a self-perpetuating entity,
True.
capable of reproducing itself.
True.
It is also in that sense that you said it can compete with human intelligence.
And that's where the line gets quite broad. But yes, I would
But
say
the
yes.
contradiction is
Yes.
that AI is a creation
Of
of the human mind,
That's correct.
and therefore it is subject to the human mind.
True. And that will always be this.
And if that human mind stops being creative, AI ceases to exist.
Yes. So that's one argument. And so reasonable argument. Very reasonable argument. I'm not going to live in 2020 and say that the movies like I Hope or people watch these movies. I mean, I don't know how many of you have watched these kind of movies before. And you see, for if you're a movie fanatic, you see Will Smith moving around with the machine trying to solve a crime. The argument really is not that humans are not the ones programming these devices. If the intellect is transferred to the machine through programming allows it to carry out the advance in the society in such a way, it means the regularity of certain jobs which we would define traditionally as clerical will be gone. So therefore, that is a reality that we cannot dispute. It's already happening. But I would take it from an academic perspective to suggest that, well, yes, we need more AI specialists or experts to keep developing these sophisticated machines. But they will be few and far between than in the majority. So with that said, what you have to now embrace is how AI will help our society to be more efficient. And if you, as the practitioner, can leverage that technology to provide that efficiency in your own lives, just like how the phone is doing that today. Right? Just like how the phone is doing that today. So it's a very compelling argument, but it's a real argument. I used to watch the movies and I'm now saying to myself and my son, for example, that the movie is now becoming reality. And I have to say to my wife, boy, it's true, you know, we can't deny it any longer. And I can't tell little ones that these things are not true because they're seeing it before their own eyes. Question? Is there a mic, a roving mic? Okay.
Good evening.
President, good evening.
It's on? Okay, anyway, I wanted to get your opinion in terms of how do you see it being adopted in the Caribbean in respect of, for me, I still see that there is a lot of financial or economic costs that you have to put in up front into developing the AI, right? And it seems as if it's not far-fetched that AI and whatever comes of that will be controlled in a sort of hegemonic and monopolized way
Yes,
by
ethics.
powers,
Yes.
and that we are not far from a new colonization. Yes,
Look at it that way.
control the means of production and powers. So that is how far I am thinking, because in the lab world we're still trying to catch up, always in the third world trying to play catch up.
All right, so you're making a point which is very valid. There's the whole area of artificial intelligence called weaponizing. So you can weaponize the AI, which is a new type of warfare that is possible, right? But with that said, I think we have to take the glass, you know, look at it from various perspectives, half full or half empty. The reality check is that we are still some way off, but I'm not saying that is something we should ignore, which is why the data protection legislation that you see taking place now globally will play a very important part of that conversation to answer that particular question that you raised. Countries in Europe have actually geared themselves up for this. So AI is adopted heavily in Europe now. However, data protection legislation has to now cater with fairness as to how AI treats with you and I as the human minds. So these are things that here in Jamaica that we also have to take caution to. Sure. A few more hands going up. Yes.
Very interesting thoughts. Thanks very much. So, picture the current situation. Student
Yes.
as it's expected that you peer review journals or whatever.
Yes.
You have your references, your sources, etc., etc. But am I saying no? Are you saying no that this is stuff? Because sometimes we say to the student, you just want to Google, and have a read it, and just download, and you just fill in the information. What's the new norm?
So it's a concern, because if you have these various AI tools that can actually compile a coherent document that can be submitted as a research paper, and remember, institutions are pushing it as research as well themselves, then the traditional academia is in trouble, because what you're now faced with is the fact that the newer generation is saying, well, listen, sir is asking me to write an assignment or a book or something. I can actually go and see if there's anything available on Springer Nature SciGraph that generates this for me, right? However, which means, therefore, it is the academic in the current environment that now needs to be retooled, because what we have not discussed in this particular presentation today is that there are ways to actually track the behavior of knowing when AI is actually the thing doing the task as opposed to the human doing the task. There's another level of conversation there that we can enter into. But the reality check is that this is going to be the new norm. The issue is, are we keeping up with these new norms? Are we keeping up with these new norms? Some of us are, some are not. Thank you very much for that question. Yeah.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Good evening now.
Good evening, sir.
It seemed to me, from listening to you, that humanity only helps machines. And I'm becoming concerned. And I understand that the old librarian is dying. But what I also am beginning to wonder is if everyone of us needs to become a computer specialist. Because there was a time when certain tasks were left to the specialists.
Yes.
But what I am hearing is that all of us, a regular person like myself, needs to have this advanced knowledge of computers in order to survive. Am I right or am I right?
So the reality is that it is creating an opportunity, a new opportunity of learning to support how you and the machine will work together. If you're saying that you're not worried that in your home, and if you're a librarian and you're in your home and you're realizing that all of these digital tools are not already available to your youth to do whatever they need to do, to the point that my neighbor's kids are saying, listen, I don't go to these existing libraries. Everything is on Cortana. What are you talking about, mommy? What are you talking about, daddy? Then you have already been hit with a reality that you have moved to a new age in which to collect and harness data. So it's not really an old librarian dying. It's really giving birth to a new life in the librarian, right? And if you look at it from that perspective, it creates a whole field of opportunity for all of us who actually have to harness and process data. Because that's what you're doing as a librarian. You're harnessing data for a living to share with the public, to advance your intellectual capacity to support the space that we are in. Great questions, by the way. I like these questions. I'm making a note, as a follow-through.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, where you're focusing on the importance of library services, very essential. And there are other talks as well in terms of the whole digital transformation, etc.
Yep.
And what really caught my attention is, as we embrace digital transformation and this whole idea of Industry 4.0, I noticed that you
Industry 5.
I'm getting started. I noticed now that you actually jumped to Industry 5.2.
Yes.
And I'm aware that AI is one of the technologies in the Industry 4.0, etc. So can you take me in that jump as to what's that the next level AI
realize that 4 focuses on technologies, 5 focuses on services based on the technologies. AI is going to be treating with those services. So AI is now becoming an agent to provide a service. So why it's called Industry 5.0 is that it's providing intelligent, interactive services using machines, where AI is the core of that. So it's not a case that AI is embedded in the Industry 4.0. That is the period where we are automating, we're having smaller devices like Internet of Things devices, but a camera that can follow you around is artificial intelligence embedded, right? That is a service. And therefore what the industry, the computing industry has said is that this has now moved to the 5.0 standard. This is something we have been writing about in the local news and so on to support the awareness to our general public, but it is a mainstay.
I'm thinking that, the more things change, the more they remain the same. And this is very, very disruptive, but is it more disruptive than when mankind moved from sailing in ships to flying in units? And what I would like us to consider is, yes, the change is going to come, but what are the core values of librarianship which will continue to exist in that new world? And will our core value of equity, of access, or core value of ensuring that the information, the playing field is, the ethics, the privacy, those issues is what I would like us as librarians to consider. Not to be scared that new coming technologies, but to see, ask ourselves what will remain from our core values.
We had said we were done, but I'm going to take those two. We said we really did,
So that was a comment to your librarian colleagues. I don't think it will wipe out the discipline of the librarianship. I just think that the librarian has to embrace the AI as a part of their new function. So therefore what it will support for them is the ability to have greater intelligence in how you harness the power of the data to help your users. So it's not something to be frightened from and be scared of. It's like when Columbus was leaving Spain to come to this, they told him he was going to drop off the end of the world. But when he went off the end of the world, he found us out here. Or he found this part of the world. So it's just embracing a new reality. That's really what I'm saying.
Okay, so our last comment or question.
Mr. Drisdale, yes.
I'm glad that you eventually reach where we just commented and you just comment that. Because the whole librarian is dying, but so is the whole computer specialist. We all will die. But what a dynamic place in the library is. I'm so excited to still be in the library. Because guess what? When we move from clay tablets, iris, the scrolls, to codex, you can imagine the exciting changes of time to the computer age now and embracing artificial intelligence. What a dynamic place the library is. And guess what? It will still be there when all of us are
Thank you so much, Dr. Thorpe, and thank you all for your participation. I'm going to ask at this time that Mrs. Natoina Garwood, a graduate student, makes a presentation to Dr. Thorpe.
Okay, so good evening, Dr. Thorpe. On behalf of my classmates, the Department of Biology, Intelligence Studies, and the Faculty of Humanities, we'd like to thank you for this very engaging and interesting discussion of key points that you raised about the use of AI in terms of quantum and Alexa in
Food for thought has left us with a lot to go home and mull over. But don't leave yet, please don't leave yet. It is now time for the vote of thanks, and I'm going to ask Mr. Mark Jeffrey Deans to come and do so. But immediately after the program has ended, I'm going to invite you all upstairs to the DLIS for a little something. You know you have to finish off with a little, you know, and some, yes. So it's a little fun and a little food, and then we will all leave each other's company. Please ensure that you come up, meet and greet before you leave.
Thank you, Dr. Heath. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I know you would agree with me that we have come to the end of a very informative and fulsome lecture. On behalf of the Department of Library and Information Studies, and of course the National Library of Jamaica, our partner, I deem it an honor and a privilege to offer this vote of thanks. This has certainly been a momentous occasion, notably because we celebrate the sterling contribution of Professor Daphne Douglas. Her contribution to the development of library and information science in general, and in particular, the development of the Department of Library and Information Studies, is recognizably and undoubtedly exceptional. Dr. Thorpe, thank you. You have challenged our thoughts, made us think outside of the box as to how libraries can seize and embrace and leverage the opportunity that is available as it pertains to artificial intelligence. Of course, the practical benefits of AI to libraries is a reality, and we must embrace that. I must thank Professor Webente Warboko, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, for being here. He has left, but his attendance has once again showed his commitment in leading and supporting this faculty in all aspects of its development and progress. We recognized earlier Dr. Pollard Carr, university librarian, recognized Dr. Stewart, the HOD of the department, and of course, I must also recognize, for the Department of Library and Information Studies, that is, I must also recognize Mr. David Drisdale, University of Technology librarian, who's here with us as well. I must thank Dr. Rosemary Heath, acting head of the DLIS, for gracefully taking up the reins of leadership. We thank you for your continued guidance and insightful decisions in overseeing the DLIS, and particularly leading the charge in bringing to fruition today's proceedings. Thank you, Mr. Graham, Deputy National Librarian, for seeing it fit to offer hand of partnership for this momentous occasion. You have always recognized, the JLS have always recognized the stellar contribution of librarians, and today was no different. Thank you. NLJ, my apologies, sir. Mr. Graham, for those who don't know, is the immediate past president of the LIAJA, having recently turned over the reins to yours truly. I want to thank Dr. Gardner for her most enlightening and retrospective view of Professor Daphne Douglas. And I must thank Ms. Tanya Manasai for really going above and beyond. Her zeal in spearheading this staging of this lecture series is commendable. You went the extra mile, and we appreciate you. We do thank, she's still here, Rhea Simone for advocating justice for ghetto state and rekindling our phobia of lizard. Thank you for sharing a portion of your talent. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your presence and participation here today, and we look forward to having you at our next lecture. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.